ladies and gentlemen. It's now time to also invite our speakers as they come together. And let's hope the insights that we're eagerly looking forward to that flows in from this side of the hall. I hope we also have some ample time to take some questions as well so that we can get the insights flowing in from that side of the hall as well. But on that note, let's get the session started. Let's get the conversation started. First up, I'd like to invite our chairperson of the advisory board, none other than Mr. Satya Tripathi, Secretary General, Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, New York, to please come on stage. Joining him, may I please invite Mr. Nadir Godrej, Chairman and Managing Director, Godrej Industries. May I further invite Deepali Khanna, Vice President, Asia Regional Office, the Rockefeller Foundation, Thailand. May I also please invite Dr. Tayeb Kamali, Chairman of the Board of Trustees, Abu Dhabi School of Management, and Mr. Kartikeya G.S, Partner, GSA. Ladies and gentlemen, that deserves a loud round of applause as we welcome the leaders. Thank you so much again, and if I could request all of you to please take your seats. A conversation that we're eagerly looking forward to. I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Satya Tripathi. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by acknowledging the presence of His Excellency, the Finance Minister of Bhutan. Bhutan has really been a flagship country, and I say this with a lot of respect because I used to be the Assistant Secretary General of the UN for Environment, and I know what Bhutan has achieved is nearly the impossible. And that speaks about national leadership, country buy-in by every citizen of the country, agreeing to that environmental compact, whereas the Honorable Minister said it came with a lot of economic hardship. It's not easy to decide to keep your ecological infrastructure intact because it's very easy to give it away, because then you have very short-term gains with long-term consequences that the world is seeing now. India is, of course, a different case altogether. It's a country of 1.4 billion people, and even small policy decisions have significant impact, not just on the environment within the country, but also on a global scale. The population is the size of the country. We have 170 million hectares of cropland under cultivation. That is the largest in the world by any measure. And then, of course, one can talk about the air pollution. Dalberg published a study last year in partnership with the Government of India that tells us that our national loss in terms of GDP is $95 billion annually, thanks to the air pollution and the water contamination and the land degradation. One could go on and on. These are humongous challenges. But it is also on the other side of the equation, our 1.4 billion people, their prosperity, their intellectual and economic growth that must go hand in hand for us to be a nation that is fulfilled in terms of the potential. So it gives me great pleasure to be on stage today with Mr. Nadir Godrej, who's the Doyen of Indian industry, Kartikeya, who represents the young, but brilliant people that are actually redefining the way we think, way we understand the challenges that confront us. Deepali Khanna, who represents Rockefeller Foundation. She's the head of Asia Pacific for Rockefeller Foundation. And Rockefeller Foundation has been a beacon of hope in terms of how to leverage the philanthropic dollar to really take it to a level where you can see the impacts magnify in terms of what it does for people and planet. And then, of course, we have our friend Tayeb from the UAE. He's a leader he has many hats and he's a leader in very many spaces. But we would like to hear from him on the education part, because one of the most challenging things has been, how do you mainstream a different thinking? In all the religions that we come from, whether it is Hinduism, whether it is Islam, whether it is Christianity, whether it is Buddhism, all religions actually have nature as its anchor. You know, what we have and what we know, we respect nature in every religion. But at the same time, that doesn't translate into mainstream thinking, mainstream planning, mainstream design. So while we are sensitive to nature and we respect Mother Nature, our behavior does not represent that. So how do we do that? And so we look forward to some great insights from what the UAE is doing as the presidency of the Conference of Parties 28 of the UNFCCC, but also as a country which is a leader in terms of finance and the resources they deploy across the world and how that's come. So let me start with Mr. Godrej. Now, the Godrej Group is a phenomenal business enterprise that goes from 1 rupee malaria treatment to aerospace engineering and everything that comes in between. And we know that in business terms, a lot of people say that, the businesses around the world have internalized profits and externalized damage to the ecological infrastructure. I know that's not the case with the Godrej Group. That has been very sensitive to these things. But as a broader conversation, that is true, that we internalize, the profits are private, but the losses are public. And so how do you really, and what has the Godrej Group been doing in terms of its leadership in that space? Because when you do something, others are noticing, others are trying to be better because they look up to you and say, well, if they can do it, we can do it as well. So tell us a little bit about what the group is doing, and also in terms of what can the industry in general do to turn the tide on the challenge that we face. Over to you. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues on the dais. ESG is not just a cost. It shouldn't be seen as profits lost. Now, businesses do realize that profit is a short-term prize. After all, what do companies gain if they die out? After all, what do companies gain if they die out and don't sustain? But how much can they afford to spend to ensure their existence doesn't end? The answer is not easy to find, but a thought still comes to my mind. If the efforts of all are combined, the synergies that we can find reduces costs and raises gain and obviates inevitable pain. There's a capitalistic strain that enthrones shareholder gain, and Milton Friedman could see that this simplistic philosophy could lead to great efficiency. But wherever there's externality, this capitalism, red in tooth and claw, can prove to be a dismal flaw. Correction can come from regulation or even from self-remediation. And Adam Smith himself foresaw that business could address this flaw. It should be clearly understood. One can do well by doing good. Doing it smartly, we do better. So why not be the trendsetter? In capitalism's early days, we see social responsibility in some degree to dissipate the urban gloom. Both Cadbury, Lord Leverhulme, then pioneered the company town. It's time to get the Tata Group now very much into the loop. Because it seemed morally right, the Tata Group then set its sight at such a very lofty height for what trade unions had to fight in Europe for several years was gifted by these worthy seers from the goodness of their heart. Undoubtedly, this played a part in honing their great reputation and then contributing to the nation. And doing good is very sound. What goes around does come around. My grandfather probably saw these examples and found no flaw. He bought far away marshy land. His critics just couldn't understand. They concluded he had gone quite mad. But today, we are glad, not sad. A township then slowly arose, and this is where our business grows. We provided every needed tool, housing, hospital, and school. My uncle, known as Sorabji, way back could clearly see the environment was under stress. Neglect, he knew, would be a mess. Our creekside land was reserved, the mangroves there well preserved, and from my office I gaze out there, a Mumbai view that's very rare, with greenery all the way, until you sight New Bombay. In Worldwide Fund, he played a role. Saving the tiger was his goal. One day, I hope you will enter the Sorabji Godrej Green Center, where CII and Godrej sought to perpetuate his noble thought. And here I think we all ought to pay careful heed to Michael Porter. With shared value, there's no cost for doing good, as nothing's lost. All it takes is a thinking brain to remove a societal pain and combine it with a business gain to create a sustainable chain of endless mutual benefit. This concept is a tremendous hit. We thought we should also try and see if we could apply this philosophy to our group. Our employees also joined the loop. In the year 2010, studies were commissioned, and then, with the help of DASRA and FSG, our new program one could see. We aptly named it Good and Green, and what a journey it has been. And how do we define our role? What could be the proper goal? Good health through perfect sanitation, environment and education, all these can be seen in our program Good and Green. And so, without partiality, our goal for all is neutrality, whether water, carbon, or solid waste, and very soon we will make haste to make our net emissions zero. Will that make the group a hero? In 2010, the goal looked tall, but we took a reasoned call. Technology would save the day. So far, it has turned out that way. To achieve these goals, we will strive to do it all by 2025. As technology takes a leap, green energy gets very cheap. Keen observers quickly saw that solar also tracks Moore's law. Whether groundnut shell or bagasse, our India's full of biomass. And bamboo now is on the way, a major role it can play. At first we thought we'd have to spend, but that's not true, for in the end, the more we thought and the more we slaved, we did invest, but we also saved. And solar is still getting cheaper, and as we start digging deeper, and soon it will hit the goal of being cheaper than even coal. There are many paths that we can see for achieving carbon neutrality, but the cheapest way is certainly through energy efficiency. Real interest rates are rather low, and high returns quickly flow from any energy-saving device. For business, this is very nice. In India, mandated CSR can help us go very far. Multiple benefits is what one sees with water projects or growing trees. Good livelihoods are created, our carbon emissions are abated, trees planted at a river source maintain the flow throughout its course. So many benefits we can see. The preservation of biodiversity, different species can be tried, useful products can be supplied, like biomass or edible fruits, and yet the trunk and the roots can sequester carbon, clean the air, a win-win that is very fair. So while we decarbonize, why not also monetize? And there is so much more to gain if it's across our entire chain. Now COVID opened up our eyes. Let's hope we've become quite wise. We saw the benefits of green, but something else was also seen. The different outcomes we could see because of inequality. Can COVID then act as a spur? Now could it help to stir our hearts and minds to newer heights with ESG now in our sights? The vision that we should now share is a brave new world, both green and fair. The environment isn't all. On society, let's take a call. Throughout the chain, let's keep in sight every person's human right. It's business as usual, not bravery, to end child labor and slavery. And in all business, we should see the broadest reach of diversity. Not only is it fair and right, it would give us the best insight. Since life is full of many hard knocks, we need to think out of the box. Diversity is the perfect aid when we are required to wade through troubled waters or quagmires. Unusual thought is what inspires. Ingeniously we can plan it, serve profit, people, and planet. Sustainability is not a pain, for after all it is a gain. It helps us all to survive, last long as well as to thrive. It's a license to operate. The ecosystem finds it great. Society, governments, banks cooperate, convey their thanks. With ESG spends, nothing's lost as benefits outweigh the cost. Thank you.
That was very poetic indeed. But even if you don't have interest in poetry, I mean, I was quite delighted at the poetry itself, but even if you have no interest in poetry, the substance that it carries is fascinating in terms of the ambition, the imagination, and the acknowledgement that you really need to have ecology and ecosystems at the core of your understanding when you want to grow. Because there's no growth without Mother Nature. There's no growth without respect for Mother Nature. Because everything that we have built as the human species has come from nature. And nature is very giving, but there's a limit to its generosity, beyond which it collapses and then takes the species with it. And that's why it is extremely important for business to understand that there is no progress without respect for Mother Nature. With that, let me turn to Deepali and tell us a little bit about the amazing work that Rockefeller Foundation is doing in leveraging the philanthropic, becoming more of a new business, taking that dollar and making sure that has $100 impact instead of just one. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and it's very difficult to follow Mr. Nadir, but I'll try. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. We feel very privileged as Rockefeller Foundation to be part of the discussion today. We're a 110-year-old foundation, and our mission has always been to serve the well-being of humanity. And we always try to make sure that all the opportunities that we are offering are universal and sustainable. We know in today's world, it isn't possible for any one of us or for us at a sectoral level to be able to address the challenges we are facing. So as a philanthropy, we are really trying to, as I said, serve humanity. And with that perspective in mind, our approach has always been to go after the big bets. What do I mean by the big bets? So let me take the example of climate change. As we look at climate change, it's affecting all the sustainable development goals, whether we're looking at food systems, we're looking at energy, we're looking at gender disparities, we're looking at economic opportunities. It's all pervasive. So I think it's really important to really then see what is it that the foundation like ours can be doing. So what is needed is that we really need to be looking at how we can come out with innovative solutions that can really be scalable. I think many of us have been testing and developing a lot of solutions, but what the need of the hour is really, how do we make them scalable? So we use our resources that we categorize as high-risk capital to be able to take some risks, and we are okay to fail fast because there's no ready pathway in which we can really guarantee success. So if you typically look at the resources the foundation brings is, we come in with a long-term approach, patient capital, and most importantly, willing to take risks with our resources is how I would frame the work that we are doing. I think I'll use one example from India, which, where way back in 2010, we started looking at energy access, which was a huge issue. There were still 250 million people that didn't have access to energy. And we as the foundation knew that, the government was doing everything in terms of subsidies, et cetera, but it was really important to get the private sector to be part of this journey. And in our conversations with the private sector, they wanted three things from a philanthropy like ours. The first thing was they wanted an enabling policy environment because, what we were trying to tell them is, hey, look at renewable energy and look at mini grids. Set up 30 kilowatt plants that can actually serve about 250 households in a village. So they said, okay, we'll do that, but what if the grid comes? So we want to make sure that our assets are protected. The second important thing that the private sector was looking for is they wanted debt financing because the business model couldn't attract commercial capital. And the third thing was they weren't very sure that poor people in rural communities would be able to pay for mini grid energy because obviously the grid electricity was cheaper at that point of time. And also, many a times they were able to actually get their bills waived off. So as a foundation, we were able to provide a one-stop shop where we addressed all these three issues. And lo and behold, we now have Tata Power come into the business and is wanting to do 10,000 mini grids. So just in terms of our ability to be able to take some risks this is where we are. And we didn't stop over here. This model has gone to Africa. And at COP26, we announced a Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, where we as a foundation put in $500 million. We got Bezos and IKEA Foundation also to put in $500 million. So for the first time in our foundation's history, we were able to catalyze $1 billion from two other foundations, so $1.5 billion between three foundations, and we were able to get overall $10.5 billion because we got several DFIs to be part of this journey. So that's one point. The second point that I'd like to make is that, as a foundation, we do look at returns because there's a myth that, foundations are not looking at returns, but our returns are quite different from the way private sector looks at things. We are not looking at immediate financial returns. What we care about is social impact, how we really bringing about transformational change in people's lives. That's what we really care about. Just to give you a few examples, and it's hard to kind of say what are the financial returns, but I'll just give you, we have invested over the years in really making sure that we can provide affordable healthcare, we can provide sustainable agriculture. So these are very important things that have been done, but very difficult to quantify in terms of financial returns. Just with the big bet mindset that I was talking about earlier, many years ago, we were instrumental in setting up the World Health Organization. That was a global effort. And then, of course, here in India, whether it's the Institute of Virology or the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the foundation invested. But when it comes to immediate financial returns, definitely not. But in the long term, we know how iconic these institutions have been. Coming to climate change, just last week, we've announced $1 billion commitment over the next 5 years because we know it's really important for all the global actors to become much more bolder and make bigger commitments. So we wanted to start off with ourselves, and we want to really see how climate transition can be inclusive and really be putting more resources into innovations because that's really the need of the hour. The third point I'd like to make is that, besides our resources, what we are able to bring to the table is our voice, our credibility, and our convening ability. So over the years, we have been convening unusual actors because we strongly believe that if we're just talking within the private sector, you'll go that far. But if you could get the different ecosystem actors, whether it's government, think tanks, academia, civil society, and of course, private sector, the results are going to be much more phenomenal. I'm sure some of you have heard of the Bellagio Center that we have in Italy. This is a place where we use different actors to come together. On an annual basis, we have about 1,000 people coming in, 60 convening opportunities, about 120 residencies. This is a center where Gavi was initiated, the Vaccine Alliance, the Consultative Group for International Agriculture, the Global Impact Investing Network, as well as the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. So I think we really, really take pride as a foundation to be able to convene all the different ecosystem actors that are really important to drive towards the kind of results and impact we're looking for. The last point I'll make is that as philanthropies, we're not trying to substitute anything. In fact, we're really trying to synergize and leverage opportunities. My plea to everybody here is going to be, let's really join forces together and be much more disruptive and decisive to be really putting all our energies behind the big bets. I know right now we are facing unprecedented challenges, but at the same time, we have unparalleled opportunities as well. So I really feel that this has been an interesting opportunity for me to be part of the advisory group and really wanting to see how we as a foundation can be more actively involved in the conversations to be dealing with some of the crises, such as the climate crisis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think the work that the Rockefeller Foundation does is extraordinary. Both the Bellagio, where they bring together the best minds in the world to think differently and to come out of their silos and imagine the possibilities, to the Global Energy Alliance, which was extraordinary in terms of leveraging philanthropic capital, and then also the Rockefeller Catalytic Capital, all of it coming together. We at the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, my organization, we collaborate greatly with the Rockefeller Foundation as well. And I think it's just a beginning in terms of leveraging private finance for public good. And as she rightly said, the impact is the return. Because ultimately somebody has to look at that aspect, is to, yes, we must get returns in economic terms, but we also must get returns in terms societal terms, in environmental terms. And now, of course, all of that comes together to be the biggest challenge of humanity in terms of climate change. And in that, education plays a significant role. So I would now turn to Dr. Kamali, who's a leader. He's the Vice Chancellor of HCT in UAE, and also he's a leader in the science and technology space. And so tell us a little bit about how UAE is leveraging its position as the presidency of COP28 in advancing the cause of education in a way that, while we respect nature, but as we were chatting just before, Kartikeya was pointing out very eloquently that we go to temples and we take off our shoes before entering the sanctum because we want everything to be clean, but we are not bothered as we step out and there's litter all over and it's unclean. It doesn't bother us. So how do we square that? The same person is comfortable with both. And that can't be, because if you really respect cleanliness as part of our respect for whichever God we worship, how can it not reflect in our day-to-day lives, in what we do, and how we really translate that into science, technology, inventions, innovation, and everything. So over to you, Dr. Kamali.
Thank you. I'll also go there.
Please.
I have more points. I was jokingly saying to Mr. Godrej, it's very difficult to speak after him, and also our colleagues, because with that level of poetry, and it really sinks in, and it shows us really how important it is to be able to connect. Now, sometimes the poetry can connect in most difficult issues, whether it's environment, looking after our nature, whether it is the economic issues, or whatever the social domain could also bring. But one of the things that I'm so proud to be, and honored to be among all of you as an advisory group looking at a global sustainability alliance from every angle. And I'm happy to be part of it because I represent the education, having spent over 30 years within the K-12 system or the higher education system. I always found that if you don't pay attention, if you don't commit to education, then the returns will always be poor. We have, in the United Arab Emirates, I think we have been fortunate, and of course we are all getting ready to host the COP28 in coming weeks. We've been fortunate that our leadership has been very committed to education from very early on. And when we talk about our environment, when we talk about looking after our nature, looking after, I picked up a term about just a minute ago about investing. If you invest early, the return will be greater. Sometimes you buy a stock when it was so much, whether it's the Apple or others, and the returns where it is now. But even in education, if you invest early, if the resources are there, and it's done in a way that connects with the mindset of the young, at a very early stage, then the returns will be great. Now we've seen in different parts of the world the commitment to education, but I'm here today as one member of the advisory board to tell you we are still not even close to what we can even do more. We have seen wonderful results in different parts of the world, but the commitment to education has to start early from the kindergarten, early from the grade 4, grade 5, but not just simply in the normal way that we teach without the partnership of different industries, to really bring a set of details that will connect to the minds of people. I mean, for a young child to understand sustainability or the green effect, or to understand why it is important, there's a lot of things that happen, a lot of resources has to be invested by all partners, whether it's the industry, whether it's the government, whether it is every aspect of those who are working within the domain of the society as a whole. I picked up many years ago when I was the Vice Chancellor of Higher Colleges of Technology, that we picked up, I think it was used in Harvard or somewhere in one of those universities around the globe, a concept of learning by doing. Learning by doing, maybe it's more relevant to everything that we are trying to be part of. But when we say learning by doing, you still need things, resources, curriculum, research, finance to really make it work. Even if you are in a kindergarten, you tell a child that is 5 years old, I want you to do something. Okay, now what is it that something is if it's related to the environment? How do you produce the most innovative curriculum that reflects an early investment in childhood? Without that early investment, without having the resources to produce the curriculum, the innovation that goes in the learning by itself, whether you do it by doing, it will not work. So we as members of education world, I take every opportunity to tell any audience, any colleagues, any grouping that we are part of, that not to lose the sight that education is the key, no matter how difficult the challenges there are, still we can overcome it and make a difference. And we are making a difference in the world today. There is no doubt with the commitment. We are here today. Without us being here today, we are doing our part in pushing the envelope even further, the envelope of sustainability further. And we do hope that by working harder on not forgetting the importance of education, we can achieve more. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamali. I think you made the point very emphatically that you need to start early, you need to stay focused, and education is key. Without that, we are lost as a society, as a civilization. And that, of course, brings us to the youngest person on the advisory board, Kartikeya, because we've gone from enterprise to philanthropy to knowledge dissemination to now consulting, the one that advises us all, and on top of it, he's young. So let me ask you this, you advise big infrastructure projects and all. By many estimates, we are building one new Paris equivalent of built infrastructure every year, globally speaking, every week, globally speaking. And we would be spending about $18 trillion by 2050 in new infrastructure. And we also know that built infrastructure has always, and there are no exceptions to that rule, it has always come at the cost of ecological infrastructure. So what are you advising your clients as to how to do it better, how to make it sustainable, how to make them energy efficient and carbon neutral, if at all possible? Over to you.
Thank you so much. I think that's a pretty wide-ranging question. I'll try and answer it as best as I can. First of all, thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me over here. It's a rather illustrious panel, and I'm really honored to be on the stage, sharing the stage with these gentlemen and lady. Let me start perhaps by setting the scene, painting the mise-en-scène, so to speak, right? Where are we right now in 2023 as the world and as India in particular? First off, after years of trying to compete with the world and one of our specific neighbors, we finally made it to the top, except unfortunately that was on the population metric. So we're the most populous country in the world. So that's the first fact that we need to bear in mind. We're looking at a large population that is rising with every day and is expected to rise in the coming years, continue to rise in coming years. Secondly, we are confronted with the very real and the clear and present threat of climate change. It's no longer a question of if and when and how, but it's right here and it's staring us in the face. This very past year, we've seen numerous instances of climate change affecting our very daily lives, right from floods in our cities, to forest fires, to hurricanes, and other such extreme weather, right, which is something that is becoming a part and parcel of our daily lives. So that's the second aspect that we need to remember. The third, which is both good and bad, but the third is a rapid technological development. We're looking at a world where artificial intelligence is on the rise. We're seeing the Internet of Things. We're seeing the rapid digitization of not just large-scale infrastructure like electricity grids, but something as insignificant and paltry as stand fans, right? So these three elements, which is a rising population, the threat of climate change, and technological development, are to me a triquetra which is going to underpin and define the coming years and decades. And how we deal with them and how we harness them are, to me, going to be the metric by which future generations are going to ascertain whether we were successful or whether we passed the buck or whether sadly we failed, right? Now, in this spiderweb of circumstances, at the very heart of it, as a sort of node which is drawing a line of connection between everything, I believe, is infrastructure, right? We need infrastructure to answer the demands of a rising population. Infrastructure is harnessing technological developments. Infrastructure is needed to stem the tide of climate change. And at the same time, infrastructure is needed to fuel economic growth, which is a growing need for a growing population, right? So this is the setting, right? Now that if I sound a little grim, I'm going to be honest, things are a little grim. But there is a silver lining in the sense that we are still in a place, right? The UN has issued a report saying that while the window is closing, there is very much a window of opportunity for us to tackle these challenges and grow and ensure a better tomorrow, right? So how do we do this? I'm going to take infrastructure as essentially the jumping off point as well as the conclusion of my pitch here, right? So to pick up, there are two elements that I'd like to say from the entire climate action perspective. And even though we're sharing the stage with business and big business at that, I'd like to think that sustainability and climate action are a few of those unique points where I think business would actually crave big government rather than a pusillanimous government, right? We need leadership. We need something that pushes a firm and defined agenda. So in this, there are two elements I would like to address. One is building sustainability and energy transition into how we do business, right? Now, whether we like it or not, business is a profit-oriented enterprise, right? And that is a good thing. That is not a bad thing. But how do we ensure that this profit motive is underpinned and guided by a sustainability or a sort of the heart of sustainability? Now, in this, there are three ways the government could intervene, right? And I know this is a little easy, but taking the parable of Goldilocks, right? You have something where the push is too light. And I'll give you the example of the European carbon market. When it first started out, the cap on emissions was so low that effectively everybody was able to meet it comfortably, and the market was essentially flooded with carbon credits which were practically worthless. The market bottomed out, right? So that was a government intervention where the push was too light. Then you come back closer home, where a few years ago we introduced a very well-intentioned concept of renewable purchase obligations, where we essentially obligated certain entities to purchase a certain portion of their electricity from renewable sources. Now this was laudable, but unfortunately it was a push too far. Why? Because even though you had set these targets, effectively what was happening is that the targets were too aggressive and they were unable to meet it. But what is a sort of Goldilocks is our renewable energy auctions, which have seen renewable energy catapulted to the forefront, where businesses are able to define their profitability through renewable energy, and prices have dropped dramatically. So you find business and sustainability working in tandem. The second bucket of what I wanted to talk about was ESG, right? Now we hear a lot about the ESG mantra, but while the E gets a lot of attention, the environmental part, the S and G, not so much. That's the social and governance elements. Here, we need defined taxonomies, right? And this is where business needs to partner with the government, take a slightly more leadership role, and push for defined taxonomies and standards which can drive business. Because otherwise, you have too many competing or standards which are not seeing eye to eye, and as a result of which you don't see a sort of uniform and in-step kind of progress. That said, I'd like to conclude with one thought which I think should be something that we lodge deep in our consciousness. A lot of talk around climate action and sustainability still talks of it as a sort of option, like should we take up sustainability, or how do we take up sustainability? I think what we need to understand and acknowledge is that sustainability is an imperative. It is not a choice. So how we meet this challenge and how we ensure that that sustainability is something that is an ethos and not just a hollow word will be absolutely important, and I think our future generations will thank us for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think sustainability is an imperative is the catchword. It's not a convenient choice that we make because we are nice people, because now we are at a point in history, in terms of human history, that we have to make the most difficult decisions. And there are no easy choices, unfortunately, because if we acted 30 years ago, when the Rio Conventions first came on scene, the Convention on Climate Change or Biodiversity, or the Convention on Desertification, we had 30 years to act, and we actually haven't acted at all. We have been kicking the ball down the road, and unfortunately, the time is up, and we have to act. Unfortunately, time is also up for this panel, and we have to finish. But before we do that, in 30 seconds each, if you had the opportunity to change one thing that will aid and abet climate action in support of people and planet, what would you do? Let me start with Dr. Kamali. 30 seconds, sir.
I think spend more on education, because I think, in 30 seconds, I think I just want to echo what I mentioned, is that spending on education, it's always underrated. And there is nothing more important in today's world than what we are talking about, and looking after our environment. And for investing early, as I was saying, it's not just a nice line, invest early in education, because education, it's not like a stock or others. You can get away from not investing. You can reduce the budget by 10% and you say you can go manage yourself. It's not a specific number sometimes. But when it comes to really committing to education, it does require a lot of effort, and it does require an investment level that's by far should be greater than what it is globally. Wherever we go, there is still more to do.
Thank you. Deepali.
So I'll make a call for reversing the climate crisis. Cross-sectoral collaboration is going to be critical. We only at achieving 15% of our SDGs. We really need to be working together. I also would make a plea that, climate is affecting women and young people the most. Let's keep them at the center of everything that we're trying to do. They're being hit very, very hard. So let's just remember the impact that they're dealing day in and day out in everything that we're designing.
Thank you. Mr. Godrej.
If you are referring to climate change, it's very clear that adaptation is more expensive than prevention. And yet, because it's a problem of the commons, nobody is working hard enough on prevention. What we need is a carbon price. Either a uniform carbon tax all over the world, or limits to how much each person can emit, or each company can emit. Some sort of carbon price is required. If we have a carbon price, this problem will be solved in no time at all.
Thank you. Kartikeya.
If I had a wish list, right at the top would be greening the grid, right? I think we need to transition to green sources of energy on a priority. And I think we need, obviously, from a practical perspective, we'll need to balance that with baseload power, which can address peaking demand. But I think that can definitely be developed through nuclear power. I know that's a bit of a dangerous area to venture into, but I think, yeah, exactly. So, small nuclear reactors, I think so, greening of the grid backed by nuclear energy. And I'm going to cheat, I'm going to add one more thing to my wish list. The second would be decarbonization of the vehicular sector. I think that is also an imperative, again, as a concomitant of a rapidly growing population.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank the audience. You've been amazing. You've been listening in rapt attention, as I can see. So thank you so much, and thank you to our amazing panel. Thank you.